I needed to be quick, instant. If something could cut through my skull and reach the exact spot in my brain that holds onto these endless seconds, it might finally end this living nightmare. This morning, at precisely 10:15 a.m., my eternity began. I've made a little extra cash over the years by taking part in medical research. I'm one of those healthy volunteers who test experimental drugs for side effects. It's usually boring stuff. Blood pressure pills, kidney medication, cholesterol tablets. Nothing ever really happens to me. I've always suspected I ended up in the placebo group most of the time. But this morning was different. They said the new pill was a psychoactive substance designed to boost brain function. They gave me the dose at 10:15 and told me to wait in the lobby for half an hour until the first round of tests. I sat on the couch, picked up a Psychology Today magazine, and read a few articles. When they still hadn't called me, I read a US News cover to cover, then an old Scientific American. Finally, I looked at the clock. 10:23 a.m. Somehow I had read 3 magazines in 8 minutes. I stood to grab a book from the shelf, and that's when it hit me. Getting up felt like wading through molasses. My legs weren't weak, they were just slow. It took forever to move. Reaching for the book stretched into a minute-long process that made me bored halfway through it. When they called me back, I had already finished the first 30 chapters of Moby Dick. "How are you feeling?" the assistant asked. "Slow," I said. "Actually," she explained, "your brain is going extremely fast. Everything seems slow because your perception has accelerated far beyond normal." It made sense. Gravity hadn't changed, but even falling onto the couch earlier had felt sluggish. My mind was sprinting while my body lagged behind. The tests confirmed it. They tossed balls at me 3, then 4, then 6, and I juggled them with ease. Time seemed to stretch so far between tosses that it was boring to wait for each one to come back down. I caught Cheerios with chopsticks, counted falling coins before they hit the floor. My scores were off the charts, over 250 on something called the Knopf scale. Superhuman, they said. Then they sent me home, telling me the effect would fade in a few hours. A few hours. The walk to the elevator felt like a day. The elevator descent, another half a day. The subway ride home was like an entire week trapped in a steel box. Sounds changed, too. Voices dipped below the threshold of hearing. The high-pitched screech of train brakes dropped into a low, groaning horn. A baby's wail on the train became a slow, mournful wail song. Smells didn't shift with time, though the sweat, the brakes, the trapped air all constant, inescapable. When I finally reached my apartment, I tried to distract myself. I read 100 Years of Solitude in minutes, then 2 more books. Time barely moved. Technology crawled at a brutal pace. Loading a website felt like watching glaciers form. I tried to sleep. My body didn't agree. It was still only 1:25 p.m. My mind had already lived what felt like entire days. I took a sleeping pill, desperate for unconsciousness. That was my second mistake. The world didn't soften. It slowed even more. Blinking took minutes. Turning my head was an endless drift. The city's noise faded away until there was only silence. Not a peaceful silence, a black hole of sound. I decided to return to the clinic, hoping they could reverse it. But halfway down the stairs, the sleeping pill collided with the drug, like 2 storms merging. Everything froze. My mind was running thousands of times faster than my body. I tried to adjust my footing, but it took hours just to move my ankle. When I fell, the descent lasted days. Pain bloomed in my shoulder and stayed there, raw and sharp, stretching endlessly. 3 hours of real time suddenly meant centuries to me. Crawling was the only option. I dragged myself down the street, through the metro, weaving between frozen pedestrians like an insect moving through statues. Each step of theirs was a glacial slide. I reached the platform. The sign said, "Next train in 20 minutes." 20 minutes. To me, that was a year. I curled by a concrete bench. The pain in my shoulder throbbed like a burning sundae. And then everything slipped further. My eyes closed. A blink became a lifetime. Sight vanished. Sound dissolved completely. In the void, my brain filled the silence. Whispers in alien languages. faces I didn't know, worlds I invented and destroyed. I lived countless lives in the dark. I spoke to gods of my own making. I became one. When my eyes finally opened again, it took ages for even a slit of light to form. All I could see were ankles, the edges of an advertisement, and the stillness of the platform. I clawed my phone out of my pocket with movements that felt like decades. Boredom isn't the right word anymore. It's a crushing weight, a physical thing pressing on my skull. My mind has burned through every thought a human can have 1,000 times over. This is what forever feels like, not in the afterlife, not in a dream, but here, under fluorescent lights and peeling posters. To everyone else, I'm just a man sitting on the floor of a subway platform. To me, I have grown old here. Ancient. I've aged lifetimes beneath the ankles of strangers who don't even see me. The drug will wear off eventually. Maybe in an hour, maybe 2. But that's centuries from where I'm sitting. And so I wait, blinking through endless time. A prisoner not of walls, but of perception itself. Our neighborhood was quiet, orderly. Nothing ever seemed wrong until the Wycliffe house. Dark wood trim, tall narrow windows, a crooked weather vane, and Mr. Wycliffe. Always precise, always alone. One Wednesday night around 12:30 a.m., I noticed the upstairs window. Empty. Then the curtain shifted, as if brushed by a hand. Faces pressed close, pale and wrong, with eyes too wide and smiles that felt off. I froze, heart pounding, unable to look away. Something about that house had changed, and I knew it was watching me. 2 faces stared out. At first I thought they were children, but something was off. Their skin was pale, almost translucent in the glow of a distant street lamp. Their eyes were too big, set too far apart, their mouths pressed into wrong, almost smiles. They didn't blink. They didn't move. They just watched. The ice clinked against the glass in my hand. When I blinked, the curtains fell back into place. The window was blank again. I told myself it was headlights, reflections, anything but what it felt like, being seen. The next night, they were there again. 3 faces this time, crammed against the pane like passengers on a crowded bus. One hovered behind the others, higher up. They looked staged, perfectly framed by the curtain, as if posing for someone. I tried to take a picture. My phone camera showed nothing but darkness. No faces, no figures, no proof. I stared at that black rectangle longer than I'd like to admit, hoping something would appear. When I looked back up, the curtain was closed. I told myself stories to sleep. Maybe relatives were visiting. Maybe TV light was playing tricks. Maybe I just needed rest. But rest didn't come. By Friday, the faces appeared earlier each night, 10, then 9:30. More of them, pale like wax, grinning those warped smiles. Every photo I took came out blank. Then I heard it, a single tap, sharp and clear, like porcelain on glass. My chest tightened as I looked across the street. One of them raised a thin, pale hand and tapped again. The sound carried through the night, straight to me. I shut my blinds that night and locked my office door for the first time in years. Days bled together after that. I tried not to look, but their presence crawled beneath my skin. I'd pass the front room and feel them, like pressure building behind the walls. My girlfriend, Marissa, noticed the change in me, how my eyes always drifted toward that house, how I jumped at small sounds. "You're feeding it," she said one morning over coffee. "Like a stray cat. Stop watching, and it'll stop showing up." But I couldn't. Not looking was worse, like turning your back on something standing too close. The neighborhood held a small block party that weekend. Marissa thought it would help, seeing Wycliffe in daylight. You'll realize he's just a weird old guy, not a monster. When he appeared, he wasn't frail, at all tall, composed, his smile practiced. He drifted through the crowd without brushing against anyone, as if he occupied a slightly different space. When I asked casually if he had kids visiting, his smile faltered. "No," he said flatly. "Just me." He walked away without another word. A few nights later, I passed his house deliberately. The upstairs window was dark. Just as I convinced myself it was nothing, I heard scratching, a sound like tiny nails raking across wood. Then whispers, soft, high-pitched, layered like overlapping recordings, and giggles. Not one, many. I hit record on my phone. The moment I did, the whispers stopped. The curtain swelled outward, as though something behind it pressed its weight into the fabric. I ran. The faces didn't stay contained for long. By the following week, there were more of them. Dozens. Some big, some small. Their features twisted like reflections in warped glass. And among them, one face I knew better than my own. Marissa's. That night I woke to find the bed empty. The front door hung open. Marissa was already across the street, barefoot in her nightclothes, walking toward the Wycliffe house with her head tilted up to that cursed window. Her face was blank, her arms slack. The door opened for her. She walked inside. I screamed her name. She never turned around. The police searched the house. No sign of her. No footprints. No Marissa. Just Wycliffe, standing calmly behind them, hands folded, like a man who'd already rehearsed this moment. Now every night, the faces crowd the glass. They're not hiding anymore. They want me to look. And Marissa is always there at the center, waxy and silent. Her smile stretched wrong. They don't just appear in his window anymore, they're in mine. Reflected in my laptop screen, tapping on the glass when everything is silent. I don't sleep. I don't leave. I just watch them as they watch me. If you ever see faces in a window across the street, don't look back. Don't convince yourself it's nothing, because the moment you acknowledge them, they know. And then, they start to move. My name is Lucy Collins. My grandfather, Thaddeus Thad, to everyone vanished last November from his home in Keegan, Wisconsin. No signs of struggle, no forced entry. The door locked from the inside, his truck in the driveway, the television still on. The police scoured fields, wooded lots, and riverbanks for weeks, but winter came early, covering everything. By March, all they found was emptiness. Grandpa had lived in Keegan his entire life. He followed the same routine for decades. Coffee at 6, church on Sundays, grocery run on Tuesdays, journal entry every night before bed. He'd been journaling since he was 12. I discovered his last notebook in June, 6 months after his disappearance, wedged behind the refrigerator during an auction of his abandoned home. At first, the entries were normal weather, Packers scores, aches in his knees. Then they changed. The handwriting grew erratic. He wrote about strange things in the grass, about children, about deaths. By the final pages, it was clear. Grandpa was terrified. He called it the shadow at first, then the black devil. Children were attacked first, old people next. The strong got gashes, visitors went home with stories, and the weak simply disappeared. He described the creature moving like water over grass, eyes yellow as embers with spines along its back. He mapped its paths, noticing how it used the overlooked parts of town ditches, edges of lawns, alleys. He believed it sought souls, not meat, and that it could sense attention. I read the pages over and over, trying to reconcile them with the Keegan I knew. Grandpa wrote about neighbors' children running, people withdrawing into their homes, cats disappearing, and even local cryptid hunters getting slashed by invisible blades. He watched it himself one night, describing it as a sleek, black glide over the grass, low and wide, moving with precision, eyes catching light briefly. It made no sound, yet the grass shivered under its passing. He wrote about how he and a few neighbors tried to fight back motion lights, stakeouts, radios, rifles, but it avoided detection. It seemed to test them, to measure their fear. The creature's territory expanded nightly, slowly encroaching on his block. He marked the day he noticed the first faint grooves in the lawn, narrow paths as if pressed by a belt. Grandpa wrote about Father O'Rourke blessing doors and giving him a Street Michael medal. He recorded the pattern he noticed. Alcohol repelled the thing. Beer barely slowed it. Wine helped for a moment. Vodka made it recoil, and high-proof liquor like Everclear worked best. He poured what he could, creating puddles to push it back, though he admitted he never had enough to stop it entirely. After reading his journal, I drove to Keegan, carrying what I could: high-proof spirits, flashlights, and whatever courage I had left. The town was quieter than I remembered. Windows glowed late, streetlights were brighter, and children avoided the alleys. People whispered about it in the hardware store, marking which liquor slowed the thing. They'd learned to lay wet lines, refresh them, and push it back from porches and lawns. The parish moved evening mass earlier. The community adapted, but no one pretended they could kill it. They just survived. I keep Thad's notebook close. I can't say I fully understand it, how a thing like this exists, why it chooses its victims, why it moves like water over grass. But I know his instructions. Alcohol slows it. Vodka, Everclear, anything strong enough. I follow the patterns he documented, watching the yards, the hedges, the edges of lawns, always alert. Some nights, I hear the rasping, the soft scraping of blades of grass, the shadow testing its way across a fence or sliding past a lilac bush. I set down puddles of liquor as Grandpa instructed, and it recoils, hisses, then moves on. I don't know how long this will work, or how long I'll last, but I carry the memory of my grandfather's bravery in each line of his journal. He faced it alone, and now it's my turn. I still wake at 3-7 sometimes, remembering his final night, remembering the rasping, the hollow feeling of legs that couldn't hold. I keep the street. Michael metal in my pocket, rub it when fear threatens to steal my focus, and follow his lead. Keegan may never be the same, and perhaps the shadow will never leave, but we adapt, we survive. That's what Thad wanted me to understand. The notebook is here, wedged safely between the fridge and the wall, and I read it often. The warning is clear: alcohol, vigilance, and respect for the margins of your yard. That's all anyone has against it. Everything else is luck, everything else is faith, and I carry both now, for Grandpa, for Keegan, and for anyone who comes after us.